Gilmour Space gear up for 2 launches this year. We beam over to NASA to hear more about the Orion capsule as its heat shield is inspected from the shakedown cruise of Artemis 1. Virgin Orbit fails to fire, and some incredible astronomical findings.
From Trekzone's virtual studio to the world, with early access and behind the scenes for members, this is Trekzone's Talkin' Science.
This is the Bite-Sized Podcast catching you up on the latest science and space headlines. Gilmour Space have unveiled the mission patch for the forthcoming Test Flight 1 campaign, which will see their maiden launch of the Eris rocket. Eris is the first sovereign-made orbital rocket powered by the Sirius engine, which has undergone rigorous testing at the company's Gold Coast home base, including a mission duration static fire last year. Press releases late last year hinted at an April launch window, with the latest from Gilmour Space this week talking up the middle of the year. Trekzone will, of course, be covering this important step forward in Australia's sovereign launch capability. To dive into this ambitious goal, I had a chat with CEO Adam Gilmour a little earlier this week. How are you, my friend? How was New Year's?
Great, Matt. Yeah, had a good time. Just stayed on the Gold Coast and went to the beach often, so it was a good time to relax and think about the year ahead.
Very, very exciting. Now, also exciting is that you're back and you're hitting the ground running there at Gilmour Space, announcing that there's going to be a test launch a little later this year.
Yeah, actually, we want to try to launch twice this year. We're in the middle of making 2 vehicles, and we want to do the first one around the middle of the year. A lot of work ahead of us still. We finished all the outer mold line of the rocket, so all the main fuselage points are done, the tanks are all done. We've got most of the components already manufactured, but now we've got to do a lot of assembly work. And because it's the first time we're putting the rocket together, you can almost count that not everything's going to go well during the assembly. So we want to, put a bit of time in budget-wise for things that don't go exactly as planned. But so far, so good. The team's fully back at work this week. So we've had a lot of good meetings this morning. Good plan ahead of us. And I think everyone's very excited in the company because this is a year it's going to happen after so many years of getting to this point.
And I believe that pretty much everything, if not everything, is 3D printed. Is that right?
No, we don't 3D print everything, but we 3D print plenty of stuff. We take a very pragmatic view into manufacturing, and we look at how long it takes to do it, what's the cost implications. So we find 3D printing's great if you're iterating. If you're trying to make a component that you're not 100% sure is going to work, 3D printing is a very fast way to do that. And so we've used that a lot for components, but that doesn't mean if we have to mass produce things, we're going to use 3D printing. But safe to say, a good whack of our first vehicle is 3D printing.
You've been working through the last couple of years that Talkin' Science has been around with that engine, getting that static firing testing done. I think it was last year that you had a full mission duration burn static test as well. So certainly meeting all these milestones. How confident are you about 2 launches this year?
Rockets are really tricky. There's all these things that come up that you can't really know that they're coming other than looking at other rocket companies and seeing them delayed. So I don't want to be one of these people that goes, okay, 10 other rocket companies have had all these delays. I'm not going to have them because I'm special. So, we almost sit down and say, okay, we look at our, competitors or people that have done it already. And, they said they wanted to launch it this time and it's been pushed. The SLS is the best example of that. That was scrubbed a few times, etc. So, I'm definitely confident we're going to have at least 1 shot. Reasonably confident we'll have 2. We're certainly budgeting to be able to finish the second vehicle this year. And the other thing that we're definitely doing is we're learning a lot from the first vehicle. So there's literally bigger parts of the rocket that took us 3 months to do on the first vehicle that we're doing in about 3 weeks on the second vehicle. That's not every single component, but a lot. And so we do think that we're going to speed up the further we get along the way.
And that's the best teacher, really, isn't it? That experience and failure, as it were, the iterations, as you said, getting through all of those and just learning and refining. This is kind of the year to make those little fumbles to get to a point where you're quite confident to be launching quite regularly and achieving Australia's sovereign launch capability.
Yeah, I mean, we think no matter what happens with the launch, we learn a lot. You know, just putting the vehicle together, you learn a tremendous amount. Getting the launch site done and operational, you learn a lot. Before you launch, you do what's called a wet dress rehearsal. So you fully load all the vehicle with fuels, you test the valves, test a whole lot of other stuff. Even getting to that point is a long, long, long way. It's probably like 70% of orbit already before you even get off the pad. So, you know, this year is a great year for us to learn and use things that we learn to build the future vehicles and the bigger vehicles that we're doing.
So I spent a couple of weeks down at the Whalers Way Orbital Launch Complex with Southern Launch in December. Unfortunately, didn't get launches. They were hoping to launch 2, but had issues with that Kestrel 1 rocket, a bit of a fuel leak, and then just communication issues as well. But it was a fascinating look at how the Australian space industry is heading and working with all of these challenges and making those massive steps forward. It really is all about making steps forward. And as you mentioned, SLS as well. I mean, that had to be rolled back into the vehicle assembly building because of a hurricane. But, you know, there's always going to be those little stumbles along the way. It is awesome to see that the ambition is there for 2 launches this year. I guess what's the next biggest milestone for you guys there at Gilmour Space?
The launch site's at Abbott Point, which is halfway between Mackay and Townsville. So completing that launch site is a big milestone for us. We think it's going to get completed around March. It's mostly completed already. We've just got a few extra things we've got to put on it. And that'll be a big deal. And then we are integrating the rocket in stages. So the 3rd stage will probably be first, then the 2nd stage, then the 1st stage. So as each stage is completed, like fully assembled, ready to get tested, ready to fly, each one of those is a big milestone for us.
We're back with Talkin' Science interviews for 2023, and this week I'm chatting with Orion Vehicle Manager Frank Lin as they begin the daunting task of analysing the telemetry gathered during Artemis 1 to ensure the spacecraft is truly human-rated and capable of returning humanity to the lunar surface and, of course, bringing astronauts home as well. Well, Frank Lin, welcome. What is the vehicle manager responsible for there at Orion?
So as a vehicle manager, what I do is I kind of, what people call it like different part of the industry, they call it like, like booster mother or no. So what I do is I watch over the Orion vehicle. When a vehicle is being built, I make sure that it's being built on schedule. I follow it all the way from cradle to grave, also throughout the mission. And I make sure that I don't do the actual work, right? As a vehicle manager, I kind of oversees, how it's being built. Is it meeting schedule? If it's not meeting schedule, then what's holding it up? What are the issues, the challenges that I need to go ahead and introduce, essentially intervene, just make sure that we can go over those hurdles and then get the vehicle going again so that we can get it all built on time and to go ahead and meet our mission objectives and milestones.
We'll catch my chat with Orion Vehicle Manager Frank Lin on Friday, or if you're watching this in the future, via this card on the YouTube video, or indeed jump onto the trek.zone/TSIV046. That's Talkin' Science interview number 46. Well, Virgin Orbit has failed to launch. That's the unfortunate headline for the Richard Branson Company, who were attempting to launch the first ever orbital mission from the United Kingdom. The Start Me Up mission was smooth sailing from takeoff of Cosmic Girl, the Boeing 747 carrier aircraft. The drop of Launcher 1 was completed at 6:09 p.m. local time. The first stage engine fired 2, as well as stage separation 3.5 minutes later. The upper stage engine burned for 5 minutes as planned, but the long coasting phase that followed was the clue that there was something wrong. And it was indeed confirmed by Chris Relf, Director of Systems and Verification on the live stream, who said that it appears that Launcher 1 has suffered an anomaly. The failure has resulted in the loss of the entire payload of 9 satellites, and we'll hopefully learn more as the investigation continues. This was the first time Virgin Orbit had attempted to launch from outside its Mojave Air and Spaceport in California, and is a precursor to launches from Toowoomba in Australia, following the signing of an agreement with the Wagner Corporation to build a base at the aerodrome an hour west of Brisbane. NASA's Transiting Exoplanet Survey Satellite, TESS, has made a very interesting find, a second Earth-sized exoplanet in the same star system. The Exoplanet Survey first found TOI 700d in 2020, along with 2 others orbiting the red dwarf star, which has been confirmed over a 2-year study to not emit the usual death to all carbon life rays of more violent stars. But then in October 2021, an alert flashed for astronomers that there was potentially something else orbiting TOI 700a. Looking a little closer, Emily Gilbert, an astronomer at NASA's Jet Propulsion Lab, found TOI 700e in a larger orbit, and some might argue beyond the so-called Goldilocks zone. But the definition of the optimal habitability zone is in flux, given that here in our solar system, Venus and Mars were once likely to have been just as hospitable as Earth. That makes 4 planets in the system so far. B and C are too close, but D and E might be just right. The 241st meeting of the American Astronomical Society is underway in Seattle, and early data from the James Webb Space Telescope is stealing the headlines. It's confirmed now the ambitious mission to exceed Hubble is a success. NASA's Goddard Space Flight Center astrophysicist Jane Rigby said during a plenary talk at the conference. One of the first studies utilizing James Webb data looked at how galaxies change shape. The Hubble sequence classified galaxies into 3 stages based on their shape: spiral young galaxies, a lenticular transition stage, and elliptical old galaxies. But how did those shapes come to be, and at what stage in the universe did they evolve? While another study has looked into 3 galaxies at redshifts of 8, taking us back around 13 billion years to more fully understand their compositions and temperatures. And this is just in the first year of the Space Telescope. Well, new space technology will help manage the huge volume of orbital debris around planet Earth. High Earth Orbit Robotics, an Aussie space startup, has developed the ability to utilise 35 high-quality cameras in orbit, as well as software on board existing satellites to identify and assess objects in orbit, including space junk. The cameras capture flyby images of objects and satellites at a relative speed of around 15 kilometres a second from a distance of 100 kilometres. HEO Robotics has also been steadily expanding and now employs 20 people, the majority in Australia, with a small team in the UK and the US. Members get perks. Click join under every Trekzone video on YouTube to sign up and get early access and behind the scenes for less than a cup of coffee a month. For our podcast listeners, jump onto the trek.zone/support. Clicking thanks under Trekzone's videos on YouTube enables a one-time contribution, while heading to the trek.zone/PayPal is the most direct route into this podcast budget. Nothing fancy, just my pure dedication to Trekzone for 20 years. Do any of them today and have my eternal gratitude. Or simply continue watching, liking, and subscribing. That works too. I'm Matt Miller for Trekzone. I'll see you in the comments.